Welcome back to the Day's Adventure Podcast. This is episode 2 of the Woven and Curd series. I'm your host, David Visser, and together we're diving deeper into the story that bridges history and humanity. In this episode, we'll step into the final days of peace in the Netherlands, a nation holding on to neutrality as the storm of World War II gathers on the horizon. We'll explore the political tensions, the clash of ideologies, and the cultural and religious dynamics that defined life in this fragile moment. This episode also brings to light the laws and policies that began to isolate Jewish citizens and immigrants, painting a vivid picture of how society changed as war loomed closer. Through my grandfather's eyes as a 17-year-old in Groningen, we'll explore the emotions of those final moments before the invasion. Hope, fear, and determination. We'll see the resilience of the working class, the rural communities, and the Dutch spirit, even as the warning signs of war began to emerge. And finally, we'll recount the day of the invasion. Imagine standing in Groningen, watching the skies darken with enemy aircraft, the familiar rhythms of life breaking apart in an instant. What happened next? How did people react to those terrifying early hours? And what choices did they make as their world changed forever? This is not just a story about the past. It's a story about courage, resilience, and the choices people made when faced with the unimaginable. Between 1937 and 1940, the world moved closer to war, with key events shaping the course of history. The Dutch government, still clinging to neutrality, watched as Europe became more volatile. In 1937, the world was already experiencing growing unrest. President Franklin D. Roosevelt began his second term in the U.S., facing an increasingly militarized world. Meanwhile, the Spanish Civil War intensified, with Germany's Condor Legion bombing Guernica in April, showcasing the brutal effectiveness of aerial warfare. By July, the Second Sino-Japanese War had begun, as Japan invaded China after the Marco Polo Bridge incident, an event some historians consider the true beginning of World War II. In Europe, Neville Chamberlain became the British Prime Minister, soon to become synonymous with appeasement. In 1938, Hitler pushed further into expansion. Germany annexed Austria without military conflict. This was widely popular in Austria and confirmed Hitler's goal of unifying all German-speaking people under his rule. The Munich Agreement in September of 1938, where Britain and France, following a policy of appeasement, allowed Hitler to take Sudetenland, a German-speaking region in Czechoslovakia, in exchange for a promise of peace. This agreement, however, only emboldened Hitler and weakened Czechoslovakia, which was fully occupied by Germany in March of 1939. Kristallnacht, in November of 1938, was a state-sponsored program against the Jews, involving the destruction of synagogues, businesses, and homes. This marked a shift from economic and social persecution to open violence, foreshadowing the horrors of the Holocaust. Kristallnacht, it translates to Crystal Night, referring to the shattered glass of the Jewish homes, businesses, and synagogues that littered the streets after the program on November 9th and 10th of 1938. In 1939, the final steps towards war were taken. Hitler demanded the return of Danzig from Poland. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was signed between Germany and the Soviet Union, secretly agreeing to divide Poland between them. Then, September 1st, 1939, Germany invaded Poland, officially starting World War II. Britain and France, realizing appeasement had failed, declared war on Germany. Despite the escalating conflict, the Dutch government clung to neutrality, much like it had in World War I. But with each passing month, war crept closer to the Netherlands' borders. As the 1930s grew to a close, the economic strain in the Netherlands was palpable. The aftermath of the Great Depression lingered, with unemployment reaching alarming levels. By 1935, nearly 600,000 Dutch citizens were out of work, accounting for roughly 1 in 4 workers experiencing prolonged joblessness. The Dutch guilder, steadfastly pegged to the gold standard longer than most nations, was both a symbol of stability and a source of prolonged hardship. While the policy aimed to maintain economic confidence, it restricted monetary flexibility and deepened the economic downturn. It wasn't until 1936 when the Netherlands finally abandoned the gold standard, allowing economic conditions to improve slightly. The Netherlands' economy relied heavily on international trade, with exports of agricultural products, textiles, and machinery playing a critical role. However, global demand had plummeted during the Depression, leaving farmers and factory workers alike grappling with the economic uncertainty. Farmers saw their produce devalued, while urban workers contended with factory closures and job losses. The divide between urban and rural lifestyles was pronounced. In bustling cities like Amsterdam and Rotterdam, overcrowding and poverty were common. Social unrest simmered as workers demanded better conditions, sometimes taking to the street in protest and strikes. Meanwhile, rural areas like Groningen faced their own struggles, as farmers dealt with falling prices and rising debts. Many left the countryside in search for better opportunities in urban centers, but for those who remained, life was a mix of resilience and resourcefulness. Despite these challenges, community bonds remained strong. Families often gathered around radios to stay connected with the world, sharing news and entertainment that provided both a sense of normalcy and an escape from daily hardships. In rural communities, church gatherings, markets, and local traditions reinforced a sense of belonging and purpose. For my grandfather, growing up in Groningen during this time meant being immersed in the world of contrasts. The economic struggles were real, but so was the resilience of the Dutch people. As a 17-year-old, his days were likely filled with work, family responsibilities, and dreams for the future, even as the shadow of war grew larger on the horizon. Now, it's important to remember that these challenges weren't unique to the Netherlands. Across Europe, political unrest, economic strain, and ideological battles were common. Yet, as war loomed closer, the Dutch people faced a unique question. Could neutrality protect them from the chaos that was spreading across the continent? And so, the stage was set. The Netherlands in 1939 was a country walking a tightrope, hoping for peace but bracing for the inevitable. Join me in the next section as we explore the political and social shifts leading up to the invasion and how one small country's hopes for neutrality would soon be shattered. Early warning signs of what was to come began to appear, yet many were ignored. Nazi Germany's rhetoric and policies were already affecting Dutch society. Although no anti-Jewish laws were enacted by the Dutch government at this time, Germany's propaganda and policies began to have a noticeable impact. Jewish citizens and immigrants in the Netherlands faced increasing social and economic isolation as oppressive ideologies spread across Europe, shaping public sentiment and influencing societal norms. Many Dutch citizens expressed concern, but the government's commitment to neutrality left officials hesitant to act decisively. Meanwhile, political and religious leaders faced tough choices. Catholic and Protestant communities attempted to provide support to those affected by these policies, but fear of retaliation kept many from speaking out publicly. Resistance, though small at this stage, began to take root in whispers and clandestine meetings. The ideological divide between those who supported neutrality and those who believed a proactive stance was at times hostile, creating friction within the Dutch society. Labor movements, often at the forefront of societal progress, were caught in this conflict. Some unions pushed for preparation and defense, while others clung to the hope of neutrality that would keep the Netherlands safe, as it had in World War I. Within the two factions of the Dutch Christian Reformed Church, response to fascism varied significantly. Some leaders, influenced by the Nazi propaganda machine, saw in fascism a bulwark against atheistic communism and a force for Christian renewal. Pastors like Boseveen and Erkring were notable proponents of this view, actively disseminating Nazi ideals through sermons and publications. They were instrumental in organizations such as the Order of Those Who Were Witness to Jesus Christ, aiming to align Christian doctrine with National Socialist principles. Conversely, a significant faction of religious leaders staunchly opposed the encroachment of fascist ideology. Theologians like Klaus Schindler, J.J. Bussas, and K.H. Muscoat were vocal critics denouncing the conflation of Christianity with National Socialism. They warned against the moral and spiritual compromises such an alignment entailed, emphasizing the incompatibility of fascist doctrines with Christian teachings. The Roman Catholic Church's stance on fascism exhibited notable differences between its leadership in the Netherlands and the Vatican in Rome. In Italy, the Vatican initially sought a modus vivendi with Mussolini's fascist regime, culminating in the Lateran Accord of 1929, which recognized the sovereignty of the Vatican City and established Catholicism as Italy's state religion. This accord was seen as a pragmatic approach to secure the Church's position within an authoritarian context. In contrast, the Dutch Catholic hierarchy maintained a more cautious and at times oppositional stance toward fascism. While some segments of the Dutch Catholic community were sympathetic to the fascist ideals, the official church leadership often refrained from overt support. This cautious approach was influenced by the Church's desire to protect its institutions and followers from the repressive tendencies observed in fascist regimes. While political tensions mounted, religious leaders were equally divided. Some viewed Hitler as a leader restoring order and discipline to Europe in chaos, while others saw the warning signs of oppression, persecution, and authoritarianism. Those who supported fascism did so under the guise of combating communism and moral decay, believing Hitler was a strong force for stability. However, many religious figures warned that aligning with fascism meant surrendering moral integrity to a regime built on violence and racial hatred. As Hitler's grip tightened across Europe, some religious figures took great risks in denouncing the spread of Nazi ideology. They delivered sermons condemning National Socialism, urged their congregations to resist its influence, and in some cases sheltered those fleeing from persecution. Yet, many remained silent, believing neutrality and caution were the best path forward. This hesitancy would soon have grave consequences. Hitler's invasion plans for the Netherlands and Belgium were part of a larger strategy. By capturing these territories, Germany aimed to secure a clear path for the invasion of France and establish a launching point for the potential invasion of Britain. The Netherlands, with its flat terrain and key airfields, was key to this plan. But Hitler's plans were anything but straightforward. He initially set the invasion for November 12, 1939. But postponed this several times due to weather conditions, logistical issues, and a hesitation among his generals. One of the primary reasons for these delays was the need for favorable weather conditions for his blitzkrieg, Germany's rapid warfare strategy, and it depended on clear skies and dry terrain. The harsh winter months of late 1939 and early 1940 made rapid troop movements difficult, and Hitler feared that muddy roads and unpredictable storms would bog down his mechanized units. Another critical reason for postponement was the divided opinions within Hitler's military leadership. Several key generals, including General Franz Halder, chief of the Army General Staff, had strong reservations about attacking the Low Countries too soon. Halder and others feared that a premature invasion could stretch German resources too thin, making the subsequent assault on France less effective. They urged caution, preferring to refine the battle strategies before launching a major offensive. However, Hitler, impatient and eager to strike before the Allies could reinforce their defenses, overruled many of these concerns. One pivotal figure during this time was Hans Oster, a German military officer and a member of the Abwehr, Germany's military intelligence agency. Oster secretly passed details of the invasion plan to Dutch and Belgian officials through middlemen. Despite this repeated warning, including specifics on troop movements and objectives, these alerts were not taken seriously. Dutch officials, wary of false alarms and influenced by their belief in neutrality, hesitated to act decisively. By early May 1940, Hitler could no longer wait. Frustrated by the delays and determined to strike before the Allies could bolster their defenses, he finalized the invasion plans. Operation Felgaup, or Case Yellow, was officially set into motion, with German forces ordered to launch their attack on May 10, 1940. The Netherlands, once convinced that its neutrality would protect it, was about to face the full force of the German war machine. One key figure, a German diplomat turned spy, tried to warn the Dutch government of this impending invasion. Despite his efforts, the warnings were not taken seriously, partly because Hitler's erratic timeline and partly due to the Dutch government's steadfast belief in neutrality. In the chilling early hours of May 10, 1940, the Netherlands awoke to the deafening roar of German aircraft and the thunderous advance of Nazi forces. The invasion was swift, brutal, and meticulously planned. Within hours, the Dutch defense, outdated and unprepared for modern warfare, began to crumble under the relentless blitzkrieg assault. The Germans knew that securing the Netherlands was not just about conquest. It was about control of critical infrastructure that would open a clear path for their deeper push into Western Europe. The first and most urgent targets were the bridges of Moerdijk and Dordrecht, two of the most vital crossings in the country. These strategic points were essential for rapid deployment of German forces, allowing the Wehrmacht to bypass natural barriers and rushed towards Rotterdam and The Hague. If these bridges fell intact, German troops and armor could surge forward without delay or resistance, and Hitler's commanders knew that speed was the key to breaking Dutch defenses before reinforcements could be mustered. The attack was as ruthless as it was effective. German paratroopers, among the first airborne units ever used in modern warfare, descended from the skies in a coordinated surprise assault. Their mission? Seize the bridges at all cost. Dutch forces, stunned by the sheer audacity of an enemy falling from the heavens, fought desperately to hold the crossings. But they were quickly overwhelmed. Machine gun fire rattled across the bridges. Explosions tore through Dutch positions, and within hours, German forces had secured their prize. With the bridges in enemy hands, the Dutch heartland lay wide open. The German advance became unstoppable, rolling forward with the precision of a war machine designed for total dominance. The roads to Rotterdam and The Hague were now unguarded arteries, allowing German armor and infantry to pour into the Netherlands like a flood breaching a dam. The fall of these key positions signaled the inevitable. Rotterdam would burn, the Dutch government would flee, and within just 5 days, the Netherlands would surrender. Its resistance crushed, its cities in ruin, its fate sealed. What had begun as a daring surprise assault had become one of the most rapid conquests in military history, a brutal reminder that in Hitler's war, hesitation meant annihilation. The most intense fighting occurred at the Grebbe Line, a major defensive position in central Netherlands designed to slow the German advance. The Dutch forces, though ill-equipped compared to the Germans, put up a fierce resistance. For 3 days, from May 11th to May 13th, brutal fighting took place, with Dutch soldiers entrenched in heavy fortified positions, repelling wave after wave of German attacks. The Grebbe Line was of immense strategic importance. Located in the heart of the Netherlands, it was one of the last major defenses before Germans could reach the core Dutch cities. If it fell, the road to Utrecht and Amsterdam would be wide open. Despite the Dutch soldiers' courage, the battle was a losing one. With German air superiority and better equipped ground forces, Dutch defenses were eventually breached. By May 13th, the line collapsed, forcing a retreat toward the last remaining strongholds. As the hours stretched into days, it became clear that the Netherlands could not hold out. While resistant fighters and military units did their best to slow the German advance, the sheer speed and coordination of the Blitzkrieg left little hope for a prolonged defense. The royal family and Dutch government, realizing the inevitable, made the fateful decision to evacuate. Queen Wilhelmina and key officials fled to England on May 13th, ensuring the Dutch government could continue the fight in exile. The following day, May 14th, the bombing of Rotterdam sealed the Netherlands' fate. The Luftwaffe unleashed a devastating aerial assault on the city, dropping over 97 tons of bombs and reducing much of the historic center to rubble. Fires raged uncontrollably, and nearly 900 civilians lost their lives, with thousands more left homeless. The destruction of Rotterdam was not just a military strike, it was a psychological weapon meant to force the Dutch into submission. Facing the prospect of similar destruction in other major cities, General Henry Winkelmann made the agonizing decision to surrender. On May 15, 1940, he formally signed the capitulation, ending Dutch resistance and beginning 5 years of German occupation.
occupation. In our next episode, we step into occupied Netherlands, where ordinary citizens became resistance fighters, where acts of defiance could mean death, and where the line between survival and betrayal was razor thin. What was it like to live under occupation? How did people fight back? And what role did my grandfather play in this struggle? Join me in episode 3 as we uncover the stories of courage, sacrifice, and survival in the face of tyranny.
That's it for this episode of The Day's Adventure. Remember, stay curious, stay engaged, and never stop chasing the next great adventure. The world is full of wonders, and your next journey is just one episode away. To keep the adventure alive, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Blue Sky. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for the video versions and exclusive behind-the-scenes content. Want more? Hit subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you'll never miss the next thrilling episode. The world's waiting. See you next time on The Day's Adventure.